Jeff Sessions served as the 84th United States Attorney General from 2017 to 2018. A member of the Republican Party, he previously served as the United States Senator from Alabama from 1997 to 2017. He joins us now on Moment of Truth. My name is Saurabh Sharma. I'm the president of American Moment. I'm joined by
Nick Solheim, the COO of American Moment.
And Senator Sessions, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, Saurabh and Nick. And this is the power behind the throne of American Moment. I got to say, you impressed me from the beginning.
Oh, well, thank you
really,
so much.
Both of you, and the commitment that you had and the ideas and the willingness to act on them, which a lot of people have ideas but don't act, I think is most admirable. And I'm proud of what you're doing and proud to be a part of the program tonight.
Well, we're so honored. I mean, I remember when we all first talked. I think we'd set up a Zoom call with you on our team, and you picked it up. I think you were on your wife's iPad. Y'all were driving around in a van, just seeing Alabama after your election last year, and that just, I mean, it was just delightful to kind of see. You guys really love your state.
Well, I do. Alabama's a great state, but the country is a great country. Yeah. This is a great country. Yeah. The greatest country in the history of the world. It's objectively ascertainable. And it's so stunning that we have people today who want to pretend that it's one of the worst countries ever.
Yeah.
And it's not worthy of defending. They don't know our heritage, but really I think it's a lack of real historical understanding. The world does not change overnight. And the fact that our founders could not fix every problem then existing in the world when they created this constitutional republic is not an argument for the illegitimacy of the republic.
Right.
It is, and the things ideals they stated have been advanced steadily since the founding, far more than most other countries in the world ever came close to achieving.
Yeah. Now, Senator, you've cared about these issues, the country, your home state of Alabama for a long time. Walk us through how you first got interested in politics when you were young. I want to hear the story of what high school and college Senator Sessions cared about and what motivated him to first get involved.
Well, nobody in my family were politicians.
Yeah.
I had a grandfather on the school board one time, died before I was born, but so nobody was. But my parents kept up with things. They read the newspapers every day and were. So I was sort of raised, in retrospect, in an environment in which there was no special interest agenda being driven, more of a public interest vision for the country and what politicians were honest and good and which ones were bad. You heard that around the table and in the country store my father had. So that's sort of part of it. But I had a great, interesting high school, junior high history teacher, and she was colorful and interesting and Barry Goldwater supporter to the core.
Yeah.
And that kind of captured my imagination. Her older brother was truly brilliant English teacher. He taught our 10th, 11th, and 12th grade classes. And he was a member of the conservative book club, the old conservative book club. He read every book that they put out. He told me, he said, Sessions, I'm worried about you. If you go off to college, they're going to lead you astray. And so you need to read the National Review.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I was the only person in Wilcox County beside Mr. Dickey that read National Review, and I read it from cover to cover. And I was I brought my dictionary to learn the words and was able to tell Mr. Buckley one time, you warped my brain as a teenager and I've never recovered from it, which was true. I never recovered from it. And but that was a really, so the school was small. This was 30 in my senior class.
Wow.
We were pretty far away from any city. 75, 80 miles to Montgomery was the closest city. And but the teachers were educated. They were cultured. They had good values, and we had a remarkable little school. This story is, people in Alabama all talk about it. They say it must be something in the water in Camden. But in my class of 30, one of my classmates, Judy Bonner, became the president of the University of Alabama,
Wow.
provost for 18 years and president, and then provost at Mississippi State. Her younger brother became congressman from Mobile,
Wow.
U.S. Congress. And 2 years ahead of us, Governor Kay Ivey was in that class.
Wow.
Wow.
And her chief of staff is Judy Bonner's younger brother, Joe, the former congressman. And so, but you had family values consistent with school values, and we had a very, very impactful Boy Scout troop, of which large numbers of the boys participated in, and I did. And every Thursday night we'd say our oath to God and country and to obey the Scout laws, do my best to do my duty to God and my country. That's what you were taught.
Yeah.
And in church, churches also affirm that. So you had this affirmation from several cultural entities that influenced people, and all these kids did well. I mean, in my class of 30, probably most of the parents were depression parents. My mother got 2 years of college before she had to come home because they didn't have money. My father's older brother got to college, but he hit the depression and he didn't get to go to college. And that was true throughout. And so, but they wanted us to go forward. And the message was to take advantage of the opportunities, do the right thing, and you'll be successful in life. And they celebrated people who'd gone on to become, to MIT and stuff like that. And those were things that were held up to you as that you should emulate. I think it was. So how did this happen? You go to these big high schools and they have all these computer programs and nobody knows your name.
I went to a school where my graduating class was 1,375 students. Biggest high school in Texas.
Well, you can survive that, but it is interesting that you had a congressman, a senator, and a governor from a town with classes at size 30.
Yeah.
So mathematically, that's pretty unusual. So I don't think I think there's intellectual studies. There's studies that show smaller schools actually do better. And this fetish with consolidating and building a big school on the interstate to try to impress people that you have a great school may not be any better on the inside than when there were 4 smaller schools where people knew their names. Anyway, that's another matter, but I do think that's where my interest started. When I got to college, went to a small liberal arts college, and my wife and I were part of forming the first Huntingdon College Young Republican Club in history. And so I got active in campaigns and became chairman of the Alabama College Republicans. About that time, to show you the state of politics in Alabama, the state legislature, which now is dominant Republican, had 2 Republicans in it. Only 2. And they could caucus in the phone booth,
Yeah.
I would say. So this was a George Wallace-dominated Democrat state. Right. And we were sort of the insurgents pushing back, and it took 15, 20 years. So I would say this to people today, young people today: if you continue to advocate for the truth, know what you're talking about, don't back down, stand firm, it might surprise you how over a period of time the ball starts moving your way. So the left seems to have had its day recently, but I think there's a majority out there waiting to coalesce based on many of the values that this group advocates, that Donald Trump talked about, that can be solidified and help transform the future of the country.
Yeah, I think a lot of our greatest statesmen, in America's history have been students of history and have gotten involved in politics from a very young age, starting volunteering on campaigns and that sort of thing. So when you and your wife were starting College Republicans, who were some of the people at that time that influenced you in the way that you thought about our country, our politics, and that sort of thing?
Well, of course, Goldwater really, I was, maybe junior high school, but Goldwater sort of electrified the community, and I got interested in that. I remember personally seeing the speech Ronald Reagan gave before that election when Goldwater was losing, and even I began to understand he wasn't going to win, so then Reagan came along, and that was a huge thing. And
Would you have been in college at that point?
Yes.
In Reagan, yeah.
Actually, post-college. And so I was a member of the State Republican Executive Committee, but Reagan represented the ideal. Like, why did it take us so long to nominate a movie star? All things, but he had values, right? We knew what he believed in. He made me United States Attorney. I was young, but he named me United States Attorney in Mobile. I didn't have to be told what Ronald Reagan wanted us to do. I told my staff, the president sent me here for two things: to prosecute criminals and protect the U.S. Treasury. And that's what we're going to do. That was my view about it, but it was a revolution. They had a great group of U.S. attorneys nationwide. So that was an exciting time. I guess that was clearly the most formative. And there was a whole lot of young people that arose during that time were ardent Reaganites, and they remain so. I don't think Reagan was as ideologically pure as a free marketeer as most people think. And that's the way he's remembered by a lot of people, and a lot of the purists cite Reagan, but Reagan was more realistic in his views, and he was humane, and people liked him, and they thought he wanted to help them, and he was a patriot. He talked about America, being great. And Donald Trump came along and said some of the same things in a different fashion, but there was no doubt that Reagan built a coalition that lasted. And what we need to do is to use the agenda pretty much of what Donald Trump ran on, what I had begun to advocate before he announced even. That is a working majority. And if you stay focused on those principles and bring in, you got to appeal to 70% of the American people to get 50% on a given election. They don't have to vote for you every time, but they need to feel comfortable with you and to feel like you care about them. And you need to clarify the issues, who we are and who that other group is, and why they're not good, and why they're leading the country in the wrong direction. And it's just, politics is a tough game. Yeah. You have to be willing to fight about it, and it's not going away. But integrity and sound intellectual basis for the issues, I think, is important. And I think during the Trump agenda, there was so much controversy and all the things that happened that we didn't do a good enough job of affirming why the trade is not serving our interests right, and why we can make it better. We failed to make clear why a nation has to protect its borders and why it's not good if you have a totally lawless border. And we didn't spend enough time saying, haven't we overreached in foreign policy? Maybe we did get in too many wars. And how can we readjust that? So we have this opportunity now with the Biden presidency to solidify the intellectual foundation of a more conservative, less ideological party.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. Like, how did you? So even pre-Trump, from being a young Reaganite or Reagan supporter, right, to 2014, the year before Trump decides to run for president, what happened, in our country or in your life, in between those times that made you believe the things that you did at the time that Trump announced his candidacy for president?
Well, one big thing was the battle over immigration. I studied the immigration bill that President Bush supported and the Republican leadership supported, and it came through Judiciary Committee, which I was a member, and I'd been a federal prosecutor, and I even prosecuted at least one immigration case, I remember. And we did others, but there weren't that many. And so I had a belief about this, that we need to have a lawful system. And I felt the power of groups like the Chamber of Commerce, like a lot of big business interest, and they weren't interested in the national interest and the wages of American working people. They weren't interested in lawfulness and maintaining integrity in our entire legal system. They wanted cheap labor, which is the reason boats went to Africa and brought back people. They wanted cheap labor. It was not right, and there's still an issue out there, in my view. So I think I felt that these people were not acting in the interest of the United States and the people of the United States, and it became clearer and clearer to me that when it came to trade and war, that they were out of touch. The great Wall Street Journal, I made a speech a number of times. If China subsidized their exports and closed American factory, and mother could buy athletic shoes for 50 cents less, the Wall Street Journal would send China a thank you note for subsidizing mama's shoes. Indifferent. Yeah. To the the layoffs that occurred, and so now we see the drugs. They mocked the idea that we would have an American shipbuilding. That was one issue that I was kind of embarrassed to support, but it was important to Alabama. So I supported that, the Jones Act. But the truth is, do we want all our ships made in China? Do we want no steel industry in America? Do we want no aluminum industry? Do we want Huawei taking over our 5G system and basically supplying the internet because they're a little cheaper? Is that what free trade is? If it is, it's ridiculous. It's not in America's interest. And if we have to pay a little more for some of these products and maintain strength as a nation, then I think we should be practical about it. So that you asked me how it started. I could feel this power. And also, you remember years ago, the GM president said, what's good for General Motors is good for America. Well, they were a totally American company, but now these are totally global. They're not Americans. The stockholders are not American. Their suppliers are not American in a pure sense. Some are. There are some companies, but a lot of the biggest voices that are moving huge millions of dollars into lobbying efforts, those people have already transitioned. And they've moved from being an American interested company to a global company. And you can't trust them. Politicians, government officials owe their responsibility not to the Chamber of Commerce or big business. They don't owe it to anything other than the individual citizens that they represent. And their policies have got to be best for the people. And it's not, you can't trust the global corporate elites to give the advice that runs the country. But Republicans got in the habit of, if Silicon Valley said it or European Union said it, somehow this was all correct. And if average working Americans didn't like it, well, they are deplorable. The real people these are the real people, but they don't understand who they represent. They represent people, average citizens.
You've used the term masters of the universe before to talk about this globalist elite that makes all these decisions. And I mean, it's so interesting to hear you describe the mechanism by which your mind changed on these issues, because it's actually a story that I hear every day, which is that immigration is the wedge that makes you realize what's actually going on in this country, how big business that Republicans thought was their friend is not, that their interest is profits over people, and they're more than willing to sell out the country down the river if it helps them expand their profits. You were a law enforcement official, and so you being a conservative member of the Senate, it made sense that you would oppose illegal immigration, of course. I mean, and you fought against a lot of the amnesty pushes. You fought for border security, but it's a lot rarer to hear from politicians and leaders who also care about legal immigration. What was it like being in the middle of all of those fights, being often a sole voice that was speaking out against open borders, both legal and illegal? I just want to hear more about what it was like to fight against the swamp.
Well, it was a lonely thing. We had 3 big pushes. One time they spent $1 billion on lobbying. Every lobbyist in Washington was bought to try to get this thing done, and they almost got it done. But this is the problem. We're a nation that is generous on immigration. We admit 1 million people a year, every year, to legal permanent residence, green card with a pathway to citizenship. We have some 800,000 plus who come just to work. So there's few countries in the world that come close to that kind of openness, but there are limits. And the Constitution applies within our border. Our country, the government has authority within our border. And that authority derives from the citizens of this country who hopefully are steeped in its heritage, steeped in its constitutional order, steeped in its laws and traditions, and try to preserve this. And people come here because they like this, but they don't know it when they come. Many don't. And so I think our immigration system can continue to be generous, but it should serve the interest. If 2 people apply from Guatemala, one of them is a valedictorian and learned English, and one of them dropped out of high school, I mean, who should get in the country? There's some people, some progressives think, well, we should take care of the poor person first. That's not in the national interest. The government of the United States should serve the national interest. And it's in the national interest that when we admit people to permanent residency in the United States, that they be people who are going to flourish here. They have the ability to flourish here and to take advantage of this great country. And we need to have a far, far greater emphasis on assimilation and teaching that our country is different from other countries. And it's not bad. Our legal system, our constitutional order is good, and it must be preserved. To preside over in a few generations on people who think that this latest deal where the CDC orders private businesses to not evict people who don't pay their rent. I mean, that is so breathtakingly unconstitutional, improper, unjust. It just shows that the left does not respect law.
Yeah, you had reporters interviewing President Biden today about his eviction moratorium, and they were asking him, constitutionally, this probably isn't good. Why did you do it? And he said, hopefully it'll survive for a month, before they strike it down. I mean, it was kind of appalling. You had these people complain, during the Trump administration, they'd say, oh, this isn't normal. This isn't normal. But you have a president right now who is literally subverting the Supreme Court and saying, it doesn't matter that you think this is bad. I'm going to do it anyway until you strike it down. It's kind of crazy coming from people who spent 4 years complaining about Donald Trump being an authoritarian. But moving back to the immigration,
that is important.
Yeah.
When the president of the United States basically acknowledges what he's doing is illegal, and the president of the United States violates the law, that is a serious, and it's somewhat acceptable, at least among the media. And I say there needs to be a big pushback on that. It needs to be an educational moment, is to say, wait a minute. But excuse me.
Well, that's the thing too about it, is that I've seen a lot of people, particularly on the left, say, oh, well, it's just these corporations that are landlords, right? But it's something like, I think somewhere between 55 and 60% of landlords are like people who just own one property. Like they own one house that they rent out. My parents are one of those people. My parents own a house in suburban Minnesota that they rent out the same rate as the mortgage just to pay off the house.
Because they're missionaries in Honduras.
Grew up on the mission field, and so my parents rent out the house that I grew up in to pay the mortgage, and they had a renter who didn't. As soon as there was Governor Tim Walz in Minnesota, as soon as he issued the eviction moratorium, which we had in Minnesota for a little over a year, the renter, though she still had her job, didn't pay rent for a year. And my parents, savings gone, paying the mortgage. And so it was extremely difficult for a lot of normal people. I mean, I can understand relief for, people who have lost their jobs and trying to figure out some solution, but an eviction moratorium was not it. I mean, I think we wiped out a ton of families, middle-class families in particular, that only owned one property. And I think it just goes to show that Biden not only doesn't care for the rule of law, but the Democrats no longer care about the middle class.
This is such a stunning development. This is such a direct assault on the constitutional order and private property. It's a taking of property. It's confiscation of a person's property for public use. And under the Constitution, you can do that through condemnation, but you have to go to court. And you have the government, if they're going to take it from you to give it to somebody else, they have to pay you for it, fair market value. And you get to go to trial over that.
Yeah.
You don't get to. So they just order your parents, just order them to let this person stay there free. And but it's not the moral question. It's not the policy question to me that's so stunning. It's the legal question. That cannot be tolerated. Supreme Court is going to knock this down sooner or later. It cannot be. And but the fact that it's gotten this far and the president saying, well, it's probably not justified, but maybe we can get away with it a little while.
Yeah.
Maybe your folks ought to sue him personally,
Yeah.
But somewhere there's something big time wrong there.
Yeah. Senator, I want to talk to you about law and order, because this is one of the issues that I think the right has gone so far astray on over the last decade. I mean, they seem to have lost their spine when it comes to being willing to fight for law and order. On one side, you have, I mean, again, going to do a little libertarian bashing. It's always libertarians, you know, they want to do things like legalize marijuana. They want to have permissive drug laws. There's this big push for so-called criminal justice reform, which is really just releasing violent criminals from jail. When did you start seeing this trend on both right and left to oppose a tough on crime attitude? Because you were there in the 90s when Congress was tough on crime, and how did we fall so far from that, and what are the consequences you've seen because of it?
Well, it really started in 1980. I was appointed United States Attorney then. Reagan ran on crime. That was a bigger issue for him than the Soviet Union. People thought he was going to cause a war. So they were scared. Reagan's going to cause a war. But he talked about crime. He'd been tough in California. Not the U.S. attorneys that he appointed, and I was one of them, knew exactly what, and we had been having, like we are today, we'd gone over a decade of almost double-digit increases in crime. People had burglar bars on their homes in middle-class neighborhoods. People were afraid. And so it started, and it took about 15 years to reverse this trend. And by the mid-90s, homicide rate was half what it was in 1980. People never would have thought that in 81, if you'd have told the American people these trends that seemed to be inevitable, never ending, were going to be reversed, and we're going to have half as many. New York, Giuliani and Bratton and company, they went from 2,300 murders in 1 year in 91, I think, to under 300.
Wow.
Now, how many lives are saved? That's good policing. People said, police need training. Do you think they haven't been trained?
Yeah.
I mean, do you think they haven't studied? These police chiefs work for liberal mayors. They are funded by liberal cities and councils. They are an extension of the left-wing Democratic cities. So if they're not performing, it's the mayor's job to fix it and the council's job. But the truth is, they just wanted to buy into this narrative that we got too many people in jail for a joint of marijuana, which is totally ridiculous. That is not happening. They wanted to do all that. And the left, I mean, not the libertarians.
They're basically,
but you repeat yourself.
They want to save. Well, they turned on crime enforcement too. And crime was a big part of the realignment in politics of 1980. Reagan appealed beyond on the Republican base. He appealed to large numbers of Democrats who were sick of being violated. And the joke about New York was there are no more liberals in New York. The last one just got mugged. See, Barbara Boxer got him mugged in California, Senator Boxer. But so it was a national fed up, and we got serious, and crime dropped. And so I predicted that, so I was there. I was participating. I was a student of it. I watched it very closely in the 80s and into the 90s.
It's probably what motivated you to get involved in law enforcement.
Well, these issues. I got on the Judiciary Committee, and so I watched them after I left as United States Attorney for 12 years, which is a long time, and then 2 as State Attorney General of Alabama. So I on Judiciary Committee, so we watched it. I watched it closely, and the trends. So these trends, I knew as Attorney General, this was bad. It had already started. We got time to talk about all this.
Yeah,
Go
absolutely.
for it.
So really the second term of President Obama's term, they really went woke on crime. The federal prisons went from like 220,000 to 180 in the last 4 years. Then, after almost 40 years of decline in homicide rates, the last 2 years of the Obama administration, homicides went up 12 and 8%. 20%. This is stunning.
Mhm.
Most people didn't catch it, but I did because I was watching those numbers. This is unbelievable. We had figured out how to reduce crime, make neighborhoods safer. The victims were minorities and poor people overwhelmingly. It's a national responsibility of the nation to provide safety for people's communities. It was getting thrown away. So when I got elected, Trump sent me an order, reduce crime in America. Pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
But I loved it. That's exactly what we wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And so I would call our U.S. attorneys and travel all over the country. We would meet with local police and sheriffs because what the American people need to understand is crime in big cities, well, anywhere, is a local responsibility. Armed robberies and murders are not federal crimes. The FBI does not investigate those cases. 85% of law enforcement officers are state and local. So we called on them. We said our U.S. attorneys and FBI and ATF and marshals are going to work with you. And we're going to develop a plan in your community to reduce crime in your city.
Mm-hmm.
It dropped. Started dropping. The first year we had a drop. The second year had another drop. Then that's when the riots started. The George Floyd and all of that. And the Democrats capitulated. The cities capitulated. They started blaming the police, defunding police. Police were constricted in their ability to carry out procedures that have been constitutionally approved for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, you can't do that. That's somehow they think that's wrong. And these were bad decisions. So, and they try to blame Trump. James Carville did, saying it happened under his watch. It started up back after those 2 years of decline. Why? It was because the police are run by the Democratic big cities, Democratic machine, and they were making colossal blunders, and it was guaranteed to make things worse. But I will acknowledge it jumped quicker and more disastrously than I had even predicted. It's unbelievable increases in violence in America that should never have happened as a direct result of failed, bogus policies.
Yeah, we were talking about, me being from Minnesota before the show, and I have a lot of friends I went to college with who used to live, in the suburbs or kind of close to downtown in Minneapolis. They're all gone. They have all moved out like way far away from the city because it's a lawless place to be now. I mean, you had, Mayor Fry in Minneapolis would go on TV and say, oh, it's the cops' fault. And also, we're going to cut the police department budget by 1/3. And the next day, 60 police officers would quit or retire, move on to other careers, because not only were they getting their budgets cut, but, their mayor, their executive, the guy that's supposed to be in charge of them is going on TV and blaming them and saying that they're racist, basically. I mean, it's insane. And to go, I was just in Minneapolis a week ago, and even just being all around the suburbs, it's a different place. It's not the place I left 3 years ago. I mean, it's fallen apart. Boards all over businesses closed because of disastrous COVID policies in Minnesota, but also places that were burned to the ground during the riots. And I think there are a lot of cities like that across the country. So as Republicans, especially considering, that there are some Republicans now who want to be lenient on this stuff. I mean, moving forward to 2022 and 2024, should we run on a message of law and order again? And if so, I mean, how do we get the people who are supposed to be on our side to participate in this fight?
We've got to. And we need to say a few things with absolute clarity. This should never have happened. It's a direct result of bad policies, basically abandoning policies that proved to work. Mm-hmm. And we know how to make America safer. And we have to say with absolute clarity, it is our duty and our responsibility, and the people that are suffering the most are minorities and poor people. Mm. And we are not going to let it continue. You may live in your gated communities, you may live in your elite communities, but this country, in this city of Chicago and Baltimore and St. Louis and Minneapolis, you owe everybody, and you cannot allow the poor people to be suffering like this. And you think all kind of things happen. Businesses won't build a business in a neighborhood if it's not safe. Housing values drop. So you've got a person who worked for the county government and he's 65 and he bought a house and it's paid for and it was worth $150,000 or $250,000 a few years ago, maybe worth $175,000 now. Mm-hmm. All direct result of crime. There's huge cost to that. People have to close their businesses. So yes, and we've got to take, and it's part of the system, it's part of the flawed mindset of the progressive movement. It's just a highly visible example of stupidity, of ideological absurdity. They had this ideology that too many people are in jail, that police are bad, and that is not necessary, mainly because crime had dropped so much. Mm-hmm. And people didn't feel as endangered as they were. And then they took these steps, gave up what we knew worked and made people safe, and now we're reaping the whirlwind. It's just a colossal disaster. And it's going to take years to get it back.
Yeah.
I mean, people are going to die. There's blood on the hands of these cities. There's blood on the hands of many of the Democratic leaders. People like the vice president's team raising money to post bail for people who burn cities. Mm-hmm. I mean, what kind of message does that send? You think police officers don't understand that? They're watching this. And so the leaders don't want me to arrest somebody? What do you do with somebody that's 6'4" and 300 pounds and you try to bring him under control and he slaps you away? Why not just walk away and leave him alone, I guess? Because if you try to tackle the person or confront the person, you may be accused of wrongdoing. Besides, it's risky. You might get hurt doing that. Mm-hmm. You don't know what kind of person this criminal is. And so it's just, you have to have a motivated police force who are proud of their work, and they have to be affirmed by the leadership and the community. And I think we're beginning to see the tide turn a little bit, but it's going to be hard to restore the lawfulness we had previously. And they're not going to admit their wrongdoing, the people who are responsible for this. And again, it's poor people, it's African Americans, it's Hispanics that are suffering from this crime surge a lot more than the wealthy in the elite neighborhoods of the big cities.
Mm-hmm. I heard a story. I'm going to anonymize it somewhat, but I have a friend who has a good relationship with a medium-sized city's Democratic mayor. And he found out that this mayor has been able to escape a lot of scrutiny for defunding the police and giving in to the woke left because he came to an arrangement with a lot of the wealthy subdivisions in the city where he connected them with some friends of his that ran private security companies. And so they've set up patrols in these wealthy neighborhoods. Meanwhile, who actually suffers from the defunding of the police? It's poor communities that suffer the most when there's public disorder, when businesses don't feel like moving in. I mean, the left loves to talk about food deserts, and I think food deserts are a real problem. There's these parts of America where there's no fresh food you can buy for 100 miles in either direction. You know what doesn't inspire the creation of a grocery store is when the grocery store is going to be robbed every single day, when larceny isn't prosecuted.
People are afraid.
Yeah,
the lady's going to work at a fruit market.
Yeah,
when she might be the husband or the mama or somebody said, that's not safe.
Yeah.
I don't want you down there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And so it does close businesses in poor neighborhoods. And therefore, the businesses that open are a lot more expensive. And it's really a tax on the poor people in that community.
One of the issues that I feel like has been a leading edge, a canary in the coal mine for the broader public disorder we see, has been the proliferation of drugs over the last 40 years. Again, you've been on the leading edge of this fight for a long time. It seems like Republicans and Democrats alike used to be able to agree that we don't want Americans addicted to drugs, and now that's changing. And there's no bigger experiment that's been performed on the American people over the last or over humans over the last 2,000 years than what we've done exposing the population to these extremely novel narcotics, extremely strong strains of marijuana, cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, all of it. What's that fight been like? I mean, you were very active as Attorney General on this issue as well. You were active in the Senate. How have you watched that fight evolve?
Well, we've got to use good data and be honest about the facts. With regard to crime, we've probably already gone too far, but there was a justification for some people probably got over-sentenced, and you don't want anybody to serve any longer than they should serve. But we've really gone a long way fast the other way. And so I think it's probably gone too far. But with regard to drugs, so we need to be honest about drugs. One of the great false myths is that the war on drugs was a failure. The truth is that in 1980, over half of the high school seniors, according to the University of Michigan study that's been run for the last 40, 50 years, admitted using an illegal drug. In 10 years, that had dropped by over half. Now, how many young people's lives are better having not started? That created a climate in which drug use was unfair. In the college days, I used to hire kids as prosecutors and they would say that, I remember you went to parties and marijuana was all over the place. But after Reagan got elected and they started to push back against drug use, you never saw that anymore. So it was a cultural thing as much, but the law enforcement had something to do with it. Now we've got higher purity of marijuana than we ever saw. We've got a much purer heroin than we've ever had. We've had fentanyl, and we're now at something like 70,000 people died of overdoses last year. Again, drug overdoses. That is a stunning number. 70,000. When I became Attorney General, it was like in the 60s, and we were determined to see it go down. I think we did get it to go down a little bit, but that was a victory because it had been going up double-digit deaths, increases in deaths from drug use. Marijuana, you probably saw the recent article about how many people are having vomits and serious problems, and it stopped as soon as they quit marijuana. And police have said repeatedly, I remember in Boston, we had about 20 police chiefs, and they volunteered about the problem of violence with marijuana. Marijuana's supposed to make you sweet, nice and kind and gentle and chill. But I said, why? This was shortly after I became Attorney General. And the answer they gave was, which I had heard in Alabama, there was a lot of money with marijuana and they get in fights over the money and kill each other. But new studies are coming out now that says it causes psychosis, paranoid schizophrenia, and that creates violence. So I don't know, this idea that marijuana is harmless, I don't think is scientifically sound. We need to find out how it works. How much did we study the the inoculations, before we let those go out, even as rushed as we were, nobody's really studied this stuff. And I don't think it's healthy. Back in the 80s, one of the things that happened, kids started calling their pot smokers the potheads. And they dropped out. They weren't alert anymore. Their grades were failing. And other kids started turning on them and saying, I'm not using marijuana anymore. You're a pothead. And I don't know. I can't guarantee. It does seem like some people can use marijuana pretty often and not be debilitated or damaged by it. But I think statistically, if we had good data, we'll show that it's not as harmless as people say. So you got fentanyl, which is deadly. And you've got meth, which is so cheap now. Used to, they would make it in, I prosecuted a guy personally. He had a beaker, this big glass bowl with all kind of wires, and he cooked it, Then they started buying on over-the-counter drugs and converting that and to meth. And then now they've got these labs in Mexico, and they can just make unlimited amounts, as cheap as anything. And they can put it in trucks and then sneak it into the United States in huge amounts and having thousands and thousands of dosage units. So that's, to me, to say that the government should just be wide open to drugs, I think is the wrong policy. We're sort of moving in that direction. We'll have a test of it. Certainly deaths have gone up. Marijuana use has gone up. I saw the Business Channel business page reporting that the age group 18 to 24, that was the growth market. They were bragging about it. They're going to continue to go, and so marijuana investors are being told younger people are using marijuana and you should buy marijuana stock. I think we're going to. So I'm worried that won't be healthy for marriages and family. Kids may not graduate from college. They may lose the opportunity at a good job because they've not maintained their alertness and their strength of character and work ethic. If that's, hopefully, I'm exaggerating that, but I'm afraid it's. Sad fact is, I'm afraid it's true and dangerous.
Well, I think that's been the rationalization from a lot of more, I don't know the way to put it, like marijuana-minded members, I guess, like Republicans who have been pro-legalization, is they've said, well, marijuana, if it is dangerous, it's not as dangerous as this other stuff, and whose business is it of yours to care about if someone's marriage stays together, right? Or if their grades fall? Like, that's liberty. You have to be responsible for yourself or whatever. Right. What would your message be? I mean, to people, even, staffers working on the Hill listening to this show who, would say, oh, it's not government's responsibility to care about families being together and people's grades being good and graduating college, getting a good job. Why do you care about those issues? Why should Republicans care about those issues?
What if 5% of high school graduates who had the potential and were on track to graduate from college and be a teacher or a scientist or a chemist or whatever, lose that opportunity because of drugs? What is the economic, cultural impact of that? And what if their children suffer as a result? What if their marriage suffers? And what if they're not saved any money for 8 or 10 years when a good family maybe is putting aside money so when they get to be 65, they've got $500,000 in the bank, and they forego that. So I acknowledge. I think we don't know enough about marijuana right now. or at least it doesn't seem that we do. But I think this country needs to have a very serious analysis. And I am not so much a libertarian or a leftist, that I think that if you can show that something is detrimental to a country, maybe you could show that it is justified to have rules against it.
Mm.
I mean, so that's my view about it. I am not one that thinks you should legalize drugs. I think use will go up. Marijuana use has gone up, and the heavy use has gone up. So use has gone up 50% or whatever it is, and then the people who use it heavily have gone up even more. And those are the ones that are going to have psychological and other consequences as a result, I'm afraid. I think it's a matter that we should respectfully listen to the critics and say that we've over-criminalized it, or I'm willing to listen to that. But as Attorney General, the U.S. Congress had made it illegal, and they wanted me to tell banks that you can take illegal money. And how could I do that? That's not what the law is. Call your congressman if you want to do this. But it was not legalized. Mm-hmm. That's I think it's a hot issue right now. I think it's going to become less so a little bit because we're going to see the increased damage from it, drug use.
Yeah. I mean, what a novel idea, caring about how Americans are doing. It's funny, I think I would assume that most normal people living in normal communities listening to you talk right now are like, duh, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. But kind of seems to be an anathema to some people here in Washington.
This is what's sort of, to me, have been lost in some of this. The first 150 years, one liberal writer wrote of American public, whenever a bill was discussed, it was discussed as to whether it would make the people better or not. Mm-hmm. Would it enhance their character, their work ethic, or good behavior, or diminish it? That now has become like you can't even consider that today. And I do think that in this Democrat Republic that we're a part of, it will not be any better than the quality of the people who make it up. Mm. And if they want something for nothing, if they'd rather have a little joint than go to work, if they want somebody else to pay for all their difficulties, they want to blame other people because they didn't study hard in high school and were able to succeed in college. They want to blame somebody else for it. And that becomes the society we're in. We're in a society in which we've eliminated so many vicious racial policies. I saw them as a teenager and a young person. And we made so much progress. So it's not perfect, but we made so much progress. And in a lot of areas of the country, we almost never didn't have that much at all. So we can't just be in this blame game all the time. We need to create a vibrant culture where families are strong, where people are raised with good values. And we need to not denigrate, but affirm religious belief. The government should not tell people what to believe and how to believe it, but it shouldn't diminish it, demean it, like I saw a lot of during the Obama administration. Mm. I think they deliberately picked fights with religious institutions to embarrass the institutions. And I think that Trump reversed a lot of that. We put a lot of judges on the bench that are believers and respecters of religion, all of them, basically. And he asked us to write a policy to protect religious freedom and to constrain the federal government from interfering in religious belief. And we defended Jack Phillips, the cake baker in Colorado. And so those are the kind of things that was his religious belief, and I thought it was perfectly right that if he didn't want to go to some wedding and participate in celebration that he thought was wrong, he shouldn't be made to do so. So those were the kind of things that we need to advance in our way. We need to make sure that we are seeking to create a healthy culture where respect, hard work, responsibility, individual responsibility. And if things go bad, you overcome it. You don't blame somebody else. And there are jobs out there right now all over the place. And we should not be subsidizing people who won't go to work. Maybe we could help them get enough income, and I have a plan that might do this, to help them have more income. But we should not, it should be tied wherever possible to work, because that's good and that's healthy. And that's what a nation needs. And we need to be subsidizing those things, not sloth.
Yeah, this is common sense. And one of the, Senator, we've talked about immigration, we've talked about crime, we've talked about, a lot of what have been bread and butter issues for Republicans, for conservatives for 50 years. But one of the areas that I think you have yourself reconsidered over the last 10 to 15 years, especially leading into the Trump era, has been some of the details of what it is that we believe as good conservatives on economics. And I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about trade, supporting families, labor. Walk us through how you used to think about economics as a senator and where your head's at now about this issue.
Well, I grew up with people who worked, and they didn't make much money. And I had classmates that were poor, but they were proud and that kind of thing. So we had a number of things. I don't think there's any doubt we were going to have a transition to a more global economy, that we were going to import more things. But I think policymakers advanced that beyond the rate it should have been, created destabilizing results. Whole towns with textile factory with 10,000 workers, overnight it was closed. There was huge societal consequences for that, and we bounced back some. But so yeah, I did begin to feel that we were not protecting American workers sufficiently, that countries like China subsidized, they targeted American industries with the goal of putting them out of business, and then they would be the supplier. And of course, the price of them began to go back up. And that then you had the national security question. So I came to believe that, but when you talked about it, the smart people. Don't you know, Sessions? You tied to the soil or something. You worried about some old deplorable down in Alabama. It's just in the global thing now. All this is past. Well, the nation state has not ended. China certainly defends its interest. Japan defends its interest. The Europeans came over with delegations and such. They would never say anything that was critical of their country's policy, even though they may have been on the other side when it was adopted. And I think that the job of the politician is not to please the CEO. It's not even to see that we have. It's not even to advance GDP. Some people worship GDP. but the policy makers, the governmental officials have to ask, is this a healthy economy? And is everybody reasonably sharing in it? And I used to criticize, I had a little speech about people who Republicans who, well, we want more entrepreneurs. If we could just have more entrepreneurs. So I would say, like, the average guy, he doesn't know who an entrepreneur is.
Yeah.
But he knows one thing. When they talk about entrepreneurs, they're not talking about him. Because it's somebody else. 95% of Americans are not going to run a business. They're not going to run a business, 90% anyway. And they want to have a decent job. They're willing to work hard. They want to be able to save some money and supplement their Social Security. They want to have a reasonable health care system. And they'd like a decent wage. And so for 20 years pre-Trump, wages increases were less than inflation, while billionaires were surging. So this is a dangerous trend. Just any objective analysis. I mean, I believe in free markets, but this is not healthy. And so Trump reversed that. Part of that was trade, and part of that was taxes and regulations and American energy and the border.
Yeah, immigration was
a big factor in that. But now it's already reversed. I see under Biden, they got wage increases, but somebody just said yesterday that it's less than inflation.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that means the average working person is declining in his wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And my view about it was the people that have been singing this song and leading us down the road, the siren song is dangerous. And that's what creates a Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warrens and all who have excessive governmental policies. Can we do some things that help working Americans be more productive? Yes, and we should do that. But we don't want to go to a socialist economy.
Yeah, on your point about creating entrepreneurs, the GOP talks about this a lot, and I suppose you and I are kind of entrepreneurs at this point in a sense, but but I have
You're
to.
on your third business.
Yeah, so true. But I have to say, like, I grew up working in Honduras. I worked at a hog farm.
Yeah.
So I shoveled pig excrement
I had the best
for a
hog
living.
in Wilcox County.
Did you
Got a
really?
pen, still got the pen.
That's awesome.
Excuse me. Go ahead.
No, you're all good. I honestly loved working in a pig, but like in many ways, it's much more relaxing than what we do now. Like you clock in your 8 hours and then you're done. Like you get to go home and do whatever you want. And so I think a lot of Americans are very much geared towards that like labor mindset. They want to go and they want to do 8 hours of work that, supplements the community, right? Like we slaughtered these pigs for meat. We sold them to other farms. I mean, it contributed to the community. You did your couple hours of work and then you were done and you got to go and be home with your family. Something that I want to ask you about is you recently spoke at the Intercollegiate Studies Institute American Political Economy Conference. And you said something on stage that we were there also. I suppose I should mention that for our audience. But something that you said on stage that highly amused me was you called out Orrin Cass, whose book we have right there, and we had on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and said that he, I believe the word that you used was like grudgingly got you on, or begrudgingly got you on board.
I was a little grudgingly, but I signed on.
Yeah. About his, his plan about, or his statement about labor and unions and that sort of thing.
I believe it was called a seat at the table.
Right. Yes, that was what it was called. Thank you.
But I read it carefully.
Yeah. So
it was a close call, but it was time to begin to push back.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Excuse me.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about how? I mean, maybe Orrin changed your mind on this issue or the circumstances.
Well,
anyway.
I was pretty unusual. I remember when I was in high school, I guess I was working construction, and group of us in my class. I guess I was a junior in high school, and you could work in those days.
Yeah.
But so they called and said, you have to join the union. I said, I'm not joining. You have to join the union. I'm not joining the union. And it went on for some time. And I was only 3 months, to work 2.5. And so I learned a political lesson. I got a call from the state senator, Alabama state senator, who had helped all of us get a job at the big federal dam, building a dam on the Alabama River. And he said, guys, it's a big deal over there at the company. This is a big, huge construction company, national, and they really would like for you to join in. So they made it, and we knocked it down to $15. We had to pay them $15 for the right to work that summer, and I wrote on the check $15, and I said for quote in the for blank the right to work, and he didn't want to because Alabama was a right to work state, and but this was a federal job, and so anyway, he didn't want to take it, but I made him take it. So I'm as I said in that meeting, the ideal employer-employee relationship is not a hostile union against a hostile business, but the Nick Saban model where everybody pulls together as a team to win victory, make more profits, and everybody should improve. The trouble is a lot of these companies are doing great and the workers aren't improving. Mm-hmm. So there are 2 or 3 things that are happening. You asked me about how I transitions. Part of it is just understanding how much power is involved. So today, unlike 70 years ago, today, if employees want a higher wage, what does the company say? Well, we are outsourced part of the job. Mm-hmm. Or we'll just buy everything from Mexico or China. Or we'll close the plant, and that'll be the end of you. Mm-hmm. And you're not getting a raise. And we don't have to give you a raise. Mm-hmm. Besides, you people might sue us if you get hurt on the job. And they don't sue us if we outsource it to China. Mm-hmm. And so there's series of deals in which corporations have extraordinary power that they didn't used to have. And I think it has depressed the bargaining rights of American workers. And how to level that playing field, I'm not sure. But I do think, and these companies are global. Used to, a company started in a town and grew. Now the CEO who runs this plant is going, if he does well here, will go to a bigger plant, and to a bigger plant. He has no loyalty to the community. And so I think that we have to be honest and tell the Chamber of Commerce, the Wall Street Journal, you read the Wall Street Journal and wages are going up. You know what they think? Oh, it's horrible. Wages are going up. Did you see that? The numbers were up last month. Yeah. That's bad news. Not for a government official, not for a United States senator. He should be celebrating that something's happening here. Half of America makes less than $60,000 a year. A lot of them make a lot less than $60,000. So I think the power shift has been too far toward business, and they've gotten too much leverage, and as a result, their profits are up and wages hadn't been up for 20 years.
So you're thinking about all these issues. You're thinking about trade. You're thinking about immigration. You're thinking about our endless wars. And then presidential election happens in 2015, 2016. Walk us through the process by which you decided to endorse President Trump. I'm from Texas. I have a lot of friends who worked on the Ted Cruz presidential campaign, and they were just as surprised as everyone else was when your endorsement came out for Donald Trump. What did you see before anyone else saw in him and the agenda he was running on?
Well, I had begun to feel the power of this corporate elites and the big money. and the media, which was hostile to us for cultural reasons mainly, I guess. And so I was worried about it. And I thought Hillary was in a position to win. And I had fought the immigration. I knew all the details about it. But we didn't. And we basically had the American people on our side. It took a long time. But he said, we're going to build a wall. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, how much explanation did it take? And the average American nodded his head, dadgum right, we need to walk. You know, this is sick. It's been going on. Nobody will end it. That guy might just end it. I'm going to vote for him. So I had a sense that was going to happen. And I had a sense that the American people had concluded they were patriotic and supported the war and all, but they began to wonder, Iraq and Afghanistan, was this actually working for us? Syria, Libya, all these things were happening. Maybe it was time to bull back. And he had the guts to say it. So all these things Trump believed, I just want to say that, give him credit. He thought that our negotiators, trade negotiators, were stupid, that they had cut deals that had hurt this country, and he couldn't believe it. It was just stupid. And he honestly believed that. So therefore, he did not wimp out when all these people descended on him to try to get him to soften his trade and policies. And didn't they? Remember, tariffs were just totally unacceptable. When Trump slapped tariffs on them, would you rather slap a tariff on these guys or drop an atom bomb on them? Then, when trade is not fair, people are cheating you. You use economic responses. And a tariff is the most logical thing. It was at the founding of the Republic. The biggest buildings in America at the time of the Constitution were the Customs House. Mm. The only taxes we had came from tariffs almost. So this was, and so he broke the bottle on that one. The Republicans had never said the word tariff except to oppose it. We were all in line to this, free trade, and so was I. And but I did become to see that. So I thought that the guy was colorful, bold. I sensed that he was catching fire. I didn't think I knew that you could not be president of the United States if the Republican couldn't, if you couldn't carry the upper Midwest. And most people don't know, but the upper Midwest polling on immigration is higher than almost any other, even the South.
Wow.
And there also was high on trade. But upper Midwest had been devastated by unfair trading practices. And so, and probably there was a stronger support in the upper Midwest over too many wars than maybe even the South or the West. But the key, he was going to carry, when he, defeated Ted in South Carolina by such a large margin, it was after that I endorsed Trump, because I felt like he certainly could carry the South and would carry the South, but his appeal was going to be really special in the upper Midwest, and that he maybe alone could get elected. I think that's true. I don't think anybody else would have won. Even my good friend Ted Cruz, who I really admire, I don't think he would have won that election. And it was just a time, and also his willingness to stand up to the political correctness. That was huge, too, more than a lot of people realize. He just would, he called them fake news and called them out and went to war with them. And the average American was saying, I'm sick of those people, too. They've been lying. They are fake news. And so he would have won this time had it not been for the pandemic. I think that was was true. Yeah, you can say all these other things he did, and I'm sure he made a lot of mistakes, but he never went soft on his cut taxes. He cut regulations. People don't know how hard the border was. It could have been done a little faster maybe, but he pushed. He never quit on that. He stood up on trade. He reduced our international presence, more American energy, refused to sign into the Paris Climate Agreement, which was he had a lot of people pushing him to do that. He said no, and I was so happy about that one. But so I guess would say that is a umbrella that is a winning coalition. Those issues will appeal to 70% of Americans, and you should appeal to most people. If you want to win an election, you can't just appeal to 49% or even 55%, because you'll lose some. You need to have a broad appeal and hope to get 50%. So I think the new candidates and the philosophy you're approaching, that Orrin Cass is advocating, that others like ISI and all that have cultural, religious, traditional, historical values, not just GDP, by some CEO from Brussels who doesn't understand America or care about America. He shouldn't care about America. He cares about his stockholders. And so those people don't need to be running this country. We need somebody, candidates who will advance that. Don't you think? I was thinking this the other day. I am generally of the view that we don't have to have every candidate fully understand what we're talking about now and what I understand you to believe in. We just need some strong ones that do, who are being supported by the public, and the more moderate Republicans and even some Democrats are going to be brought over.
Right. Leadership matters. We think about this a lot, is that you don't have to replace everyone. You need a loud, persistent, charismatic, intelligent minority that will lead and show the squishy, cynical people the path forward. And that's the way to do it.
And that you can win.
And that you can
See, they were afraid they couldn't win on immigration, but they pretty soon figured out they couldn't win if they voted for it.
Right.
Which was, I think that's right. I think you're exactly right. I think there's reason to be optimistic. Mm-hmm. So we have the map. We have the agenda that coalesces a substantial majority of Americans, and the leftists, the people in the elite world who look down on people who go to work every day and call them deplorables and that kind of thing. They're the ones that are vulnerable. And if they say a man's got to let somebody stay in his house and not pay rent, those things, the average American knows that's more than just a little money. Mm-hmm. This is a threat to the constitutional order in this country. So I'm pretty excited about the possibilities. We've got some young voices out there in the Senate and the House that are setting good messages. But when I left as Attorney General, I thought that there was a gap, and that is we needed more of an intellectual foundation for the Trumpian type agenda, the one that I had been fighting for, the one that he pretty faithfully advocated for. And when you come out and show that we're not ideological, we're practical people. Conservatives are practical people. They live in a real world. So we're going to legalize all drugs now? We got too many people in jail, so we're just going to let them all out without knowing the impact of that. So conservatives are saying, well, How many people can you let in this country illegally? Don't we have to have a border? And the Republicans that say we're not a country with an idea, no, we're a country. We got laws, we got borders, we got a heritage, a history that binds us together, and people will fight and die for that entity, that nation. We've always brought in more people than most other countries in the world, and it's been blessed us, but it needs to be at a level that we can absorb and that people can be assimilated. And they need to buy into this republic, not have want to create a different republic. So I'm optimistic. It's not certain. Who knows what will happen, but the Republicans need to win a majority back in the Congress. I think they can do that, but they can't do it. We cannot do this if we have libertarian purists and Trumpian people fighting at each other all the time. I mean, this is the working majority. If we stay in there all the way, that's a winning majority that can govern this country and maybe save it.
Senator, I mean, it's a joy to talk to you every time. I mean, just as an aside, I remember the first time I met you, I was doing a fellowship program with CPI, and we met over lunch. You were speaking to all the fellows, and I don't think there's anyone I've ever met where there's as big a gap between how the media portrays them and how they are actually in real life. And you were definitely a shock in that sense. I mean, I think we had a noon lunch, and over the course of an hour, you referenced 30 things you had read that day. I mean, you're still clearly keeping up with the issues, and I hope you'll continue to be a voice for these values in the public square for a long time. And so thank you for everything you've done for the country, and thank you for believing in us as well.
Well, I do believe in you, and I'm telling you that if you're going to reverse the trends and advance this agenda, we got to have people like you that are working night and day. You don't keep a time clock, do you? Y'all don't do that.
No.
I mean, so you're totally committed to this, and I really admire you for it. You're going to continue to be successful.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you all for listening to this episode of Moment of Truth. Be sure to subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and tune in next week. Thank you for listening. Moment of Truth is an American Moment Studios production, filmed at the Conservative Partnership Center. Our podcast is produced and edited by Jake Mercier and Jared Cummings. Our intro music is A Minor Struggle by Ryan Serenich. Don't forget to like and subscribe on all platforms, and you can go to AmericanMoment.org to learn more.